Good afternoon, this is Mrs. Jacobs. This is GOMath lesson 6.7 and 6.8, but today we're really ordering fractions using common denominators. So teaching point, I can order fractions using common denominators. This is standard 4.NF.2. Okay. And we had learned in 6.7 how to compare fractions using common denominators, and now we're just applying that to ordering fractions. Ordering fraction is when we're given two or more fractions, we have to put them in order. Order meaning least to greatest or greatest to least. Okay, so I put some important things that I want to talk about quickly. Make sure to pay attention to the directions in the questions, okay? Because inside the question, it might tell you what order they want your answer in. So that's really important. Know which order the question is asking for, or know what the question is asking for. For example, it might ask you to put the fractions in order from greatest to least, or the question might say, who ran the furthest? Okay, so we really have to pay attention to the questioning. Okay, so these are just a few examples. They could ask you to list the fractions in order from greatest to least. They could ask you to list the fractions in order from least to greatest. They could ask you who ran the farthest, which fraction has the greatest value, and so forth. Okay, so we need to use common denominators to order the fractions. It helps us to make the ordering so much easier. Okay, so all right, so in order to compare two or more fractions, we can use common denominators. Step 1, identify all the denominators. Step 2, list the multiples of all of the denominators. Step 3, find the least common multiple. Step 4, make all of your fractions equivalent to the new common denominator, which is that least common multiple. Step 5, now that all the fractions have common denominators, you could just compare the numerators, all right, and then put them in whatever order is being asked. So let's look at this. It says write 3/8, 1/4, and 1/2 in order from least to greatest. And I'm just going to underline that. It's very important. The order is least to greatest. Okay, so I'm going to follow those steps that were just in the previous slide. So again, common denominators, I have to identify the denominators, okay, which is 8ths, 4ths, and halves. And I want to list the multiples of 8, the multiples of 4, and the multiples of 2. Okay, so how do I know when to stop? Well, you have to keep going until we find one that's common in all three of these lists. So you might have to continue 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, okay? 4, 8, 12. So you have to keep going until you have something that they all have in common. Okay, so just looking carefully, I start at my top and I say, here is an 8. Does this multiples of 4 have an 8? Yes. Do the multiples of 2 have an 8? So here I could see that the 8 appears in all three lists. So that's my least common multiple. Okay. Now I have to make 3/8 equivalent. This is what it means. 3/8 will be equivalent to the new denominator of 8s. 1/4 we have to make equivalent in 8s. And 1/2 we have to make equivalent in 8s. Okay. And then we go back to our equivalent fraction lesson. Okay, how to make an equivalent fraction. So 8 times 1 will give me 8. So I do that to the numerator. And it's 3/8. Why? 3/8 is already in 8s. So there's not going to be no change there. Okay, now we go to 1/4. I have to multiply by 2. Multiply by 2. I get 2/8. So 1/4 equals 2/8. And then here I have to multiply by 4, multiply by 4, and I have 4/8. So now I have 3/8, 2/8, and 4/8. Now they all have the same denominators. So when they all have the same denominators, I compare the numerators. So here I have a 3, 2, 1. I'm sorry, 3, 2, and a 4. So I go back and I reread, and they want least to greatest. So I'm looking for the least one, and I see that's 2/8, right? But I'm not putting 2/8 in my list. 2/8 is really 1/4. So 1/4 goes first. So you're using the common denominators to help you place the original fractions in order from least to greatest, right? So I did that one. I'm going to put a check. Now the next greatest one is 3/8, which really is 3/8. Still 3/8. And then my greatest one is 4/8, but 4/8 is really 1/2. So the 1/2 gets put in the list. So now I have put these fractions in order from least to greatest. So here's a list. But if I needed to write comparison symbols, it's 1/4 is less than 3/8 is less than 1/2. Okay? That's what we're saying. Okay, next slide. Write 4/6, 5/12, and 2/4 in order. Now I'm doing greatest to least. Okay? Same thing. We're doing multiples of 6, multiples of 12, multiples of 4. Multiples of 6, 12, 18. Multiples of 12, 24. Multiples of 4, 8, 12. Okay? And again, I see here 12, 12, 12. The LCM is 12. Okay? So I make 4/6 equivalent to 12s. 5/12. Guess what? I'm going to just make 5/12 because that's what it's going to be. It's already in 12s. And then 2/4 I have to make it in 12s. Okay? So going back to equivalent fractions, 4/6 times 2 is 12. Multiply the numerator by 2, and I get 8/12. This one is 5/12, already done. And now 4 times what will give us 12? 4 times 3. And I do that to the numerator, times 3, and I get 6. Okay? So now I want the order greatest. So I can do this. The greatest has to be here. Okay? And I have 3 fractions, right? So which one's the greatest goes all the way in the first place. So greatest, 8/12, 5/12, 6/12. So I know the 8/12 is greater, but really the fraction that I'm using is really 4/6. Okay? Then I notice, put a little check, that 6/12 is next, which really is 2/4. And then last but not least, 5/12 is really 5/12. Okay? So there I have it in order from greatest to least. Okay. All right. So here's a problem. Samantha and her 2 friends, Julia and Richie, had a relay race. Now, one thing about relay races is just like any race, and especially all the races in the Olympics, right? When we're talking about Olympics, it's the shortest time is the first place winner. Okay? So you have to do it in the shortest amount of time because you are the fastest. Okay? So when you're looking at relay races, it's a little bit different. That's why I'm showing you this example, right? So Samantha and her 2 friends, Julia and Richie, had a relay race. The table shows their finished times. In what order did Samantha, Julia, and Richie finish the race? So I see 2/3 of an hour, 6/12 of an hour, 3/4 of an hour. They want to know who finished first, second, and third. Okay? So again, we're going to do the same kind of work. Okay? So we have 2/3 is Sam. 6/12 is Julia. And 3/4 is Richie. Okay? So I need to identify who's the first place winner, second place, and the third place winner. Okay? So I'm going to start out by finding common multiples. Okay? So I'll list the multiples of 3, the multiples of 12, and the multiples of 4. Okay, and again, in this case, it's 12ths. The LCM is 12, right? So I know 6/12 is going to stay the same. So 2/3 equivalent in 12ths. 6/12 is going to stay 6/12, guys, because that's where we're in 12ths. And 3/4 equal to in 12ths. Okay, so when I do the math, 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times 4 is 8. So I have 8/12, 6/12. And 4 times 3 is 12. And 3 times 3 is 9. I have 9/12. Okay, so who finished first? Now, first is the shortest time. So I'm looking for the least amount of time. And who did that is the person who did 2/3. Nope. Is the person who 6/12. Sorry, 6/12, 8/12, 9/12. 6/12 finished the race in a shorter amount of time. That's the least fraction. So who's 6/12 is Julia. So she goes first. Second place winner is 8/12. Who did 8/12 is Sam. And last place we have Richie. Okay, so there you have it. We have put the runners in first place, second place, and third place. All right? Okay, so you can use this video to help you with your math homework tonight, which is GOMath, right? And we're really focusing on 6.8. Again, please show your work using common denominators. If you do not have any room in the GOMath book, you may use your math notebook. And make sure that we are using the strategy that we learned here today. Thank you.